Hey guys, welcome to the Rock and Road Show. And this is volume 2 or story 2 about haunted Texas. And don't forget, if you can click and subscribe while it's free, and I get enough of these, I can do some live ones, and it won't take me as long, and they won't be as boring and or as dark. Yeah, I'm a little bit limited on time. So I had this figured out. What I do is I make the videos when I can. They download while I go to bed. Go to sleep. Because they can take up to 8 hours. Yeah. And I found out on TikTok that anything over a few seconds won't download at all. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I give up. Because I went through that a bunch of times and I am wore out on that. So tonight, though, it looks like we've got a little bit of moon and a little bit of light, which is nice. And, of course, the bugs are biting the snot out of me again. It just rained cats and dogs again today on the 30th. It flooded a lot of rivers and a lot of stuff. And I don't want to talk political, and I don't want to talk about a lot of drama. But I got to tell you, the storms, oh my God, since spring in Texas, have killed and wiped out. I can't begin to even wrap my head around how much life, the bees, the butterflies, the caterpillars, all of them, the birds, wiped them all out. Because we are way out on a bunch of land, and there was always a lot of wildlife here. A lot of birds and bees and caterpillars and really neat stuff. Beautiful things. And gone. Some of the trees got so much water they just didn't even sprout flowers, and the little tiny fruits that they do, they just gave up. Yeah, they didn't even pollinate because the pollinators didn't show up. The pollinators got wiped out from the storms. And it killed so much of the wildlife. It's unbelievable. But the possums, I think some of my possum family survived. Yeah, that's another episode for another story for another time. And it's not so dark. Okay, so when my first dog that you see on this channel, the little tiny girl Pomeranian that was a caramel color, and I first did this channel years ago, when she was still alive and I first got here to Texas, her and I went to somebody's house and they weren't home yet. Right. And it got really late at night. And I waited. I was like, oh my God, I can't take this any longer. I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I had told him, I said, all right, I got it. I'm going to sleep. You know what? I can't take this. I'm exhausted. I'm going to lay down in the back seat. And when you get here, you get here. When you don't, you don't. I got to get some sleep. So I left my tequila in the front passenger seat, and she got some sleep. And we kicked the windows open and the doors open, and we had some nice cool air. And it was, I forget what season it was, but I didn't have all the doors open. I was like a little leery, so I had my doors locked and not all the windows down. And we kept waiting, and I got in the back seat, and I was so exhausted. I just got tired, and finally laid down to go to sleep. Well, while I was sleeping, I was so stressed out and so worried about them to see if they were here yet. I kept getting up and looking to see if they were here, to see if they showed up. And this all took place out by an area called Lake Stillhouse. And I think they had a movie once. I think it was a horror movie, but The Lake or something like that. Yeah. And, oh yeah, what's his name? A really good looking guy. Judd Hirsch. Hot, very hot guy. And, Lake Stillhouse has had a lot of rumors about it. It's been a creepy place on and off for a long time. I know I met a really weirdo one time in the Walmart store that told me when his dogs got real old and he couldn't afford to have them put down, he would just throw them over the bridge. Yeah, down to the lake, Lake Stillhouse, yes. I've talked to you guys about Lake Stillhouse before on another show, and I talked to you and told you how the brilliance of the high-level IQ rangers for Texas decided to get rid of one of the types of fish, and how they decided to do that was getting alligators to eat the particular type of fish. Yeah. Somehow that was miraculously going to happen. I did a whole show on that a while back. You can check on my channel, on my past shows. I did a show on that. So there were even alligators up around the freaking area. Yeah, because the alligators went apeshit, of course. They had lots of food to eat. And, nobody was shopping for them. So they had a really great time. And it's kind of desolate in some places and sparse in some places and way out. And there's a lot of just real dead, dry trees. They're called a Mexican oak. They're pretty much worthless for shade. They're rough. They're hard to touch. They're hard to cut. They're a real hard wood like steel. And the leaves are real tiny and scrappy and crappy. And if you're roasting to death, you try to stand under one, you're just going to roast freaking to death. And so my buddy's house had that kind of tree around it, and it was scrappy and gnarly and quiet and desolate, you know the deal, right? And dark, yeah. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. And so every once in a while I'd fall asleep, I'd be sleeping, and everything was great, right? You're in la la land, you probably don't even know you're asleep, and you're finally getting some sleep, and then all of a sudden something just wakes you up. You know what I mean? And so I would kind of burst awake, and then kind of look around a little bit and see how things were going, and see if my friend was there yet. Nothing. And finally I hit that mode, that state you get to where your ass ain't waking up. You're not checking on nothing, not even if you have to pee. So, you finally fall so hard asleep, you're done. You don't even know what planet you're on anymore. Well, that's what happened to me. And but I kept getting up a couple of times because I thought my friend was finally there, and I look over the back seat, and I looked out the back of my Hummer H2. Yeah, you'll see it in my other shows if you've watched my shows. And I looked out the back to see, I think I had the back deck or the back hatch closed, that I could see directly out the window. And I when I started looking way out, like at the end of my buddy's driveway, kind of like here, okay? And I looked like at the end of like the grassy area of the driveway, kind of like here. I kept thinking I was seeing, like, those freaking garden lights, the ones that light up at night and are real pretty, and some of them look like flowers or little windmills, or they look like birds and stuff. You know what I mean? They used to have them at the dollar store, and they were really neat. And then they raised the price. They were like $5, and then they were $10, and then they were $15, and then they were missing. Those brilliant, beautiful, miscellaneous colored lights. Right. You heard what I said. And I thought, well, what the heck am I? Well, first I thought, what am I seeing? What am I looking at? And because there were these just not all together, spaced out in different areas, beautiful, like those little plug-in solar lights that were real pretty, like butterflies and stuff. And they would light up at night. You guys probably seen them. I'm sure you have. Every grandmother in the planet, every great-grandmother in the planet probably had them in their yard. I knew hippies and drug addicts that had them in their yard. They're real pretty. I thought, because I saw it more than once. Because I kept getting up every once in a while. See, my friend was there yet. Right. And I kept getting up, and I don't know why I was getting up, but I was getting up. So, and I kept going, oh, Well, those are beautiful. Yeah, I could see them enough that I looked at them, I watched them, I went, oh, they're just so neat. And I thought, they're all spaced out in different areas, like about, I don't know, every few feet, right? And I thought, oh, there must be like a whole garden over there. I didn't see it when I got there earlier, before it got real dark. And I thought, or he might have had pets that passed away, and that was his pet cemetery. Right. Yeah. Hang on to your panties. So, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of neat, and that's kind of beautiful. And, I thought, well, I'm just waiting, because I figured he'd show up, and I would ask him what all his beautiful lights were. Well, next thing you know, I finally hit that dead sleep like I told you about, and I didn't wake up till like the next day, and the sun was up, and I was like, oh, and I jumped up, and I looked around, and my buddy still wasn't there. I'm like, oh, God. All right, fine, whatever. So I kind of rested and hung out with the dog, did the dog potty in the yard, and did some stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to walk over there, and I'm going to go see where all his little garden lights are all lighting up. I didn't know he had a garden, or I didn't know he had a pet cemetery. I didn't know he had anything. But he had inherited the house from his parents. And so I went way over to the edge of the, where that grass kind of runs out in the driveway or in the edge, and there was like a little old wooden fence. Yeah. And it had been there like a long time ago, made out of wood. And it's kind of unusual for here. And it was a split wood, if you know what that is. It's almost like a finished wood. It's purposely split and cut like in squares. So I went kind of like through it, over it, under it, because it was falling apart. And I looked on the other side, and I still couldn't see what the heck the big shebang was. I couldn't see what the big deal was. I couldn't see any grave markers. It didn't look like a pet cemetery to me. I looked around for garden rows. There were no freaking garden rows. I was just standing in another stupid field of those stupid Mexican oak trees. There was not a flippin' thing out there. Nothing. There was not even the little garden lights that I thought I saw. There were no lights. Zero. Zip. Zilcho. There were no lights stuck in the ground, little solar lights. No. None. I was like, oh, holy crap. Okay, I'm out of here. I don't know what this is, but I am out. And later on, I asked him, I said, so, hey, I know this might sound weird to you, but when we were here, and we kept waiting, and I finally fell asleep. And I said, during the night, I kept like bouncing awake because I thought, oh my God, you're here finally, right? And he goes, yeah, okay. And I said, you know what I saw? And he kind of got funny and kind of got quiet and a little chuckle. He says, what? I said, you know where the wooden fence is at the end of the driveway? And he goes, yeah. And he said it kind of funny. He said, yeah. Right. Like he knew. And I said, what is that over there? He said, nothing. It's just the old extra land. My parents said there used to be a house over there a really long time ago, but I've never seen it, and I think it's a long way over there or something. I don't know why. I said, well, I saw all kinds of lights all night long, different colors, green, yellow, purple, pink, whatever, blue, green, like those little garden lights that you stick in you should have seen the look on his face. Priceless. He says, oh, you're kidding me. I said, no. And I went over in the daytime, to go see the little garden lights you had up, to see if you had a use. I don't have a garden over there. I said, yeah. And then I thought, well, maybe you had some dead pets and you had your little thing. He goes, you know something? He goes, all the years we've lived here, all our pets that died, we actually didn't bury him over there. Oh, okay. He goes, maybe one time, maybe one. He goes, but we just never went over there. We don't go over there. And I said, well, I just wanted to see the garden lights and see what I was seeing all night long. Because all night long, every time I got up, I distinctly saw these beautiful lights all lit up over there in different colors. And they weren't all, he goes, did they move? Did they move around? Did they move together? Did they move separate? I said, no, they kind of like had their own little spot. And he wanted to go back out. He wanted to know where they were. He wanted to look. And he told me, he says, you know something? I know what you're talking about. I've seen them before. He goes, I saw them before, and I never came back here again, ever. I would not come over here. And he told me, he said, I didn't want to tell anybody else because I didn't want them to think I was nutty. He goes, but I know exactly what you're talking about. He goes, and I don't know what they are. He said, and finally one time my dad and I started talking about something, and he said he saw them. And then that's when I told him I had seen them. And he said to me, he goes, my dad said that they were here like when he first got here. So they have been here for forever, a really long time. And we don't know what they are, and we didn't bother them, and they didn't bother us, and we just left them alone. I was like, oh my God. I said, well, so do you think they're like little spirits or something? Or you think anything was ever buried over there? He goes, nope, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it was anything bad or anything too creepy. He said, because we never had a problem. He said, we didn't see them all the time, just sometimes. And I was like, wow. And he said they had just decided to just leave the colored lights, do their thing. But I can tell you that they weren't a bug, as I've never seen anything before or after. And they're not like a lightning bug or a lantern bug or a glow bug. They're not. And because they have those little tiny glow bugs here, but they're so little. I mean, they're like the size of my pinky fingernail. They're real tiny, and you got to pick them up real careful. The little lightning bugs. And so they weren't lightning bugs, because those lights were like, when I looked out, they were substantial. About the size of golf balls or bigger. A good sized baseball, not a softball, a baseball. Yeah. So anyhow, it was a very interesting experience. And I asked him, I said, so you think they were like sprites? He didn't know what those were. And I've always been an antique book reader and collector. And in Britain, they used to write a lot of literature about fairies and that lived in the forest and stuff like that. And I read it, and I own some incredible antique books where they talk about fairies and elves and gnomes and stuff like that live out in the forest, and sprites that have light and they actually light up. They're like fairies, but they're a special fairy that lights up, and they're called sprites. But England also talks about fairy orbs of energy and orbs of color, and people have caught them a few times on their cameras. You guys know, you've probably seen them. You probably know what I'm talking about. I mean, you'd have to be awfully dumb not to have ever known about orbs of beautiful light. But it's the only thing we could think of. It's the only thing I could think of. He didn't even know about the British thing and about the European legends and the stories and the books and stuff like that. Because I have a great big huge fat book from the 1800s, and it's called Beyond the Looking Glass. It was actually written before Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonder and The Looking Glass. Right. And there was actually a time in the 1800s where it was really popular literature, and people would draw pictures because they didn't have a way to take the cameras and take pictures. And I've actually seen some 1800s pictures where it did look like fairies were in the photographs. Anyhow, I don't know if that's a haunting or a scaring or anything or a ghosting or not, but I thought it was a dang interesting story, and I've told a few people since I've been here in Texas. And one time I was talking to a bunch of guys, and I'm a veteran. I'm a senior disabled vet, and I go for my veterans free dinner every year for Veterans Day. And one of the old veteran guys in line, when I talked about it, he was probably older than me, and he said, yeah. He says, I know. I have seen them too. He said, I don't go where they are either. Anyhow, that's it. Have a good time, and how are the orbs in your life?